because I previously went to a school that didn't offer rowing, and I was kind of ushered into rowing because it's quite a low impact sport on the joints, which makes it a really good sport for para-athletes. Not knowing that at the time, I just ended up like falling in love with the sport, and then through watching the Tokyo Paralympics, actually watching the mixed cox 4 come down the track when I was supposed to be doing methods in my bedroom. I guess like me and my friend were just like having a conversation, like, you know, they row, you know, as we would, they use the entire slide, they use, you know, all parts of their body. What makes them para, essentially, which I think is a question that a lot of people from the outside have about some classifications in para sport, and it's a really great question to have because it can really increase diversity and knowledge. So it's like the question that you kind of want to ask, I definitely encourage. So we did some Googling and found out that I have a club foot, so I was born with my foot backwards and a little bit messed up, and when they fix it, the ankle joint and the Achilles tendon become tight and fused, and so I don't have any dorsiflexion through my ankle. And so it's on the list of conditions listed that classify, so it was kind of from there that we just like snowballed the classification process. You know, I had that conversation with my parents, why don't we just do it? Like, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but if it happens, it gives another avenue to race, you know. And if you're having that conversation with any kids at your schools that you think might be para, I think the most important thing is it's another avenue. It's not the only avenue. Sorry. They can still race age. They can still race able body. They want to go for the youth team. If they want to go for 23s, encourage that. But it's another opportunity that could increase their competitive nature within the sport and give them a pathway to a senior team that they might not otherwise be able to reach. Myself, because I don't have any dorsiflexion through my ankle, I really struggle connecting off the foot plate, and so like pressing power through the stroke is really difficult for me. So, you know, unfortunately, I would never make a senior team, no matter how big I got, because I just don't have the biomechanics to be able to excel at the sport of able-bodied rowing. So I think the really important thing, if you're trying to encourage, or you maybe, you know, see a kid in your program, Delwyn and I were discussing like what ways can you go about bridging that conversation, bridging that gap. Like a really easy way is, you know, if you've got a group like your senior rowers, just sit them down and be like, hey, we've had some updated information from Rowing Victoria, from Rowing Australia. You know, if you have any of these conditions, restricted range of motion in your joints, restricted mobility, restricted strength in a particular area of your body, you know, come and have a chat, because it's not only about identifying for para, for classification, because they might not want that, but it's also a good tool for coaches to be able to get feedback from their athletes about what might be working, what might not be working, and how you can better adapt their setup on the erg, in the boat, how you can move them around in the gym so that they're getting the most out of your training programs. I think that's something that was slightly looked over when I was in school. There was no adaptations for my ankle, even though it's a pretty obvious one when you see me row, when you see me in the gym. My heel will completely lift off the ground during a squat, a deadlift, all of the above kind of movements. And there was no kind of like additional thought as to, okay, well, how can we make this movement biomechanically safe and effective for Susannah? And so if, you know, there's one thing that you take from me being here today, it's not obviously like classifying people for the para pathway to be able to compete for Oz is fantastic, but if you're able to better support your athletes just in your school environment, it gives them, as Delwyn was trying to talk about, like an increased chance of them rowing on. If they feel seen, if they feel heard, if they find the sport comfortable to be in, then they're more likely to continue. Yeah, so I think that is probably my main point, just like opening that conversation to your kids, listening to the feedback they give you. If they're having problems with workload, you know, altering it for them. And also, if you maybe have kids in the school environment who don't participate in rowing currently, this one's probably a broader school initiative that you would have to talk to teachers, you know, heads of senior school about. But if you say have a kid who is in a wheelchair, when I was living in Queensland before the games, we rode out of a shared Queensland Academy of Sport with one of the private boys' schools, Gregory Terrace. And there was 2 boys who were in the Year 9 program, and they were both in wheelchairs, and they came down 3 mornings a week, and they both got in the coxing seat. And they were able to participate in that sport with their friends in a boat, even though they couldn't move the slide themselves. And on some Saturday mornings, the school was very well funded and had the opportunity to put them out in their own single sculls with pontoons and correct PR2 to PR1 equipment. But it was really great to see the initiative from the school to say, hey, look, we know you can't compete as a standard like slide moving rower, but are you interested in being a cox? And that's a really great role and way to like involve more kids who might not otherwise be able to experience the sport or don't see a pathway for themselves. So that's another thing to kind of think about on the lower impairment scale. Yeah.
Are there para events at Head of School Little
There's not para events at school kid regattas, but they are at like state regattas. So if you take your kids to like Vic States or New South Wales States, there's para regattas there. Any state-based regatta does not need an official classification for you to race as para. So if you think a kid is para, you can pop them in a state race. If it's a national regatta, they do need a national classification to race.
There is the opportunity ahead of schoolgirls if there are some para athletes to row.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Yes. Yeah. Now, I was going to say on this, I'll come and stand near you. I was going to say on this that if there are students that you have that you think need some adaptation, then and you're not sure what to do, then you can contact me. I've got some equipment I could loan, but we could also work out what we could do to help you with some of your athletes. During the week on Albert Park Lake, they're all adults that come down. The youngest rower is 22 at the moment, but all of the people one person had rowed and had become needing of a fixed seat. We've got another man who uses a fixed seat. We've got 2 who've got a sliding seat, amputees. We've got someone who has had an accident and has an ABI and rows with pontoons. And our aim in this is they come down, they learn to row in good weather on a lake. They start in a tub with pontoons, and the aim is to get those people to be competent and capable rowers. So then I need to find a club that will support them to continue their rowing journey, which in a way is a little bit tricky. For example, there is the couple of ladies that actually row with their pontoons on the water are fantastic, but there's no way they can be out here on a moving body of water. And so there's some requirements for the clubs that they need to be able to join. So and if there was the call for that from the schools, then we could discuss how that could happen. You know, would you like me to organise things on weekends, maybe with the support of the school, if there is someone that you think would like to have rowing like that. If there were a number of people from different schools, then we can talk about how the program could grow and maybe what we could do, and I can support that in terms of some of the equipment that we've got and whether we need more of it and how we could manage that. Because I fully understand there is no way that at the moment, with how busy your school programs are, that you're looking to see, putting individuals out on the water and how you're going to manage that. So if that is something that you would like to explore, you've got people at your school or your club who would like to explore, please contact me and we can move forward with that.
I'll just say one more thing about like classifications and impairments. So in para rowing we have 3 classes. So when Delwyn says fixed seat, she means either PR1 or PR2. So PR1 is someone like Eric Horry who doesn't have any use of his hips at all, so he mainly just uses his upper body and his arms to row, completely fixed seat and a strap around the belly button. And then our PR2 is also fixed seat, but they have some use of their hips, so they have no strapping onto almost like a back support that Eric would use, but they still don't slide the seat. So they'll lean a lot further forward and lean a lot further back because they have use of their hips. And then we've got our PR3s. We have 2 classifications within PR3. So it's kind of confusing because they haven't given it a number, but it's like PR3-4, which is basically like the boat that you're eligible for, or PR3 double. And it basically just means classification is a point system. You have to obtain 15 points over one limb, or 10 over 1 or 15 over 2 to classify for PR3. But if you hit 20 points over one limb, you're still PR3, because you need to hit 30 over one limb to be PR2, but you classify for the double, which is same. So a really good example of that would be, I have a club foot, I don't have any range of motion, I'm PR3-4. Jed, who's in our double, who just won gold, is a lower below knee amputee. He obviously doesn't have a foot at all, so he's in our double, but he's still PR3. So if you are looking out in your like general senior programs for kids that might classify, you're probably most likely looking at kids that would classify for PR3-4. So club foot, decreased range of motion through the main joints would be ankles, hip, that's both strength, mobility through those joints, and then upper limb you'd be looking at wrist, possibly elbow, but wrist and shoulder. So Toby, who is the stroke seat of our boat from Paris, he has what they call Erb's palsy, which is basically when he had nerve damage when he was born, and his shoulder, he can't like get it above here, his arm, and it's like slightly, once you know, and you can like see it, but it's like slightly smaller, it hasn't grown as much, underdeveloped, and he has decreased range of motion. So yeah, if you're just, the best way obviously is to just look and discuss, and gym is a really good way to do that if you have that in your programs.
Thanks, Susannah.
No worries.
Now, we have our third section.
That's a shocking photo.
Oh, I love that photo. I thought that was great. I went through a lot to find the right photo of John, and I thought that one, the seriousness
find one
of the
smiling,
man.
at least.
All right, over to John. Your
Oh, now how does this work?
yeah, all you got to do is continue to press that button,
Okay.
and your whole slideshow's up there.
Okay, beautiful.
Or I can press it for you as you go.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for giving up so much of your time to come tonight. This slideshow, personally, I don't like talking to PowerPoints, but anyway, it goes for about 30 minutes, so I'll probably have to do it. I'll just give you a nod. I'm just going to whiz through it, give you some facts at the start, and a little bit about my role in regards to being a pathway manager. Yeah, our goal is what we've been saying tonight, is to get boys and girls to continue on with rowing, both either here in Australia or overseas. Most of tonight's talk will be concerned with the US side of things. RA puts close to $2 million into pathways, which is a phenomenal amount of money coming from the government, and that doesn't include my salary, which comes from the AIS. Our narrative from RA, and this is really important for the coaches, if you want to advance your athletes as quickly as possible, by the end of under 23s that we saw, the boys out here tonight, stay in Australia, because you develop your skills. Our system's based on a small boat system. You develop your skills quicker by the end of 23s. That doesn't mean that if you go to the States, there's no opportunities for you to advance when you come back. And our team, particularly the men's side of team, the men's side has proven that you can go to the US, come back and still row for the Olympics, and also to a lesser extent with the females. Okay, what did I find there? Overseas, the programs are well funded by mainly two: football. Football is king. We call it gridiron here, and basketball. They love Aussies because when you think about it, their athletes, what they call walk-ons, they have to teach them how to row, and that normally takes a couple of years. Where, as was spoken about earlier, our athletes are well coached. They come through a pathway program in the school, so they know their pathway, from learn to row to quads, to sweep oar, to first eight, under 16, etc. To get into the first eight, second eight. The Aussies, because of that, sort of complement their program. Not only can they can row small boats, most can scull, lift weights, ergos, course, stability, the whole lot. So they're well sought after by the US. Funded by the football program. This is down in Texas, watching an average game, so that it wasn't as full as this in Michigan at the Big House. At the Big House. They won the football this year, or last year, and that's huge for just to make the Final Four. But to win it is worth millions of dollars for your college. And they fund the programs. And before I hit the next slide, they fund programs, predominantly female programs. So if there's one area where females are at a huge advantage compared to the guys, it's rowing in the US. A lot of sports, but it's mainly rowing in the US because of what they call Title IX. Title IX ruling was brought in by Richard Nixon, celebrated 50 years a couple of years ago. It means whatever they spend on male sport in the US, so these football teams, over 100 with 85 full scholarships, they have to complement that on the female side of things. So you get a lot of women's only rowing programs, women's only soccer, women's only lacrosse to make up for what goes on the football side of things. And this gives you a good example. The boys, what they've got available to them really are the Ivy schools on the East Coast, plus a handful of schools on the East Coast. That's all, and probably 3 on the West Coast, and that's it. The girls, currently there's 89 Division 1 programs, all fully funded and getting bigger. There's also, with the girls, probably about 15 Division 2 that are all full scholarship as well. Full scholarships for the girls in rowing are 20 full scholarships that each school has. And it's up to them how they use those scholarships. They can have 20 full scholarships or 40 half scholarships, or you can be offered 10%, an incentive scholarship, and so forth. So this is just a little bit of the rules and so forth. The nitty-gritty stuff is right at the end. But if you've got kids who are thinking about going to the US, I hope that they're going for the right reasons. There's some of the reasons up there. You need to be going for education first. If they're not going over for an education, tell them don't waste the time. Really, you want to go for a degree. You want to go to improve yourself. And for the females, not so much for the guys, but for the females, they need to get advice if they're a good rower on what school they're going to, because there are recruiters out there that in this country that can put females into programs we've never heard of, that are being funded by football or basketball, and their rowing program is quite low compared to the school they come from. I'll give a quick example of a couple of girls who I spoke to in Brisbane. It's my hometown. I advise them on the top schools rowing wise. It's not hard, just need to Google NCAA results for the last 15 years, and you find the top dozen are always there. Yet they went to a school where one rowed first 8, straight the first 8 for 3 years in Brisbane, won 3 Head of the Rivers, got over there to the school she went to and said she was the #1 athlete, which shows the program isn't very strong, and the 1V, the first 8 that she was in, would not have been as fast as the second 8, school 8. Just in regards to the 89 schools, of those each year, their championship is the NCAA's. And from those 89, only 22 schools get invited to the NCAA's. You've got to win your conference. They're all in different conferences. And depending on how strong the conference is, like the Northeast is a very strong conference, they could get up to 4 or 5 schools in there. That's the Big Ten area. I don't know why they call it the Big Ten, because I think there's 15 schools in there. But they'll have 4 or 5 schools going to the NCAA's. So of those 89 schools, bear in mind that some have never been to the NCAAs and will probably never go, yet they got full scholarships. So you need to be aware of that. There's some of the rules and so forth. I won't spend too much time on that because I've spoken about Title IX. Some of the observations of they're big programs over there. The big ones are big programs, strong athlete, coach relationship. I see them being well coached most of the time. You hear a lot of rumour around the boat park of how bad it is over in the US. I didn't see any of that. I saw athletes that are well catered for. Some do get injuries, yes, and when they do get injuries, they got people to look after them, like physios and sports doctors. We often forget that athletes back here get injured as well. Did that move?
Yes.
Okay. What I want you to, hopefully from tonight, is that you go away from here, and if people ask you about studying or rowing in the US, that they're making their decision not on rumour, but on good advice. And as coaches, I think you have a responsibility to give them that advice and be really open and frank with them. As I say to the coaches at the coaches conference last year, if you got an athlete who comes to you and says, and you're 11 or 12, I'm thinking of going to the US, the chances are there's about 90% chance they're going. All they want is for you, not so much encouragement, but not to sort of criticise them for their decision, which I know from speaking to boys and girls over there, some of the coaches back here have absolutely berated them and given them a hard time about them inquiring about going over there. And they, as they said, they were always going to go. And that relationship after that will never be the same. And I think you really need to be aware of that. If we just go back, one of the big things is the difference between Ivy and non-Ivy schools. This is more so for the females. Ivy schools don't give scholarships, they give financial aid. So if you're looking at going to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, Columbia, Pennsylvania, you need to be aware that you're going to have to provide your financials, they call it, tax returns, what assets you have. They have a formula from that they work out how much aid they will give you, if any at all. Where if you get a scholarship, they don't care what you own. You could own half of the city, you still get a scholarship. With the Ivy education, with the Ivy aid as well, once you get the aid from an Ivy school, they can't take it away from you. That's it all the way through. Even if you stop rowing, you still get that financial aid. With a scholarship, if you get a scholarship and you decide that you're not going to row anymore, well, you lose a scholarship. There's only a couple of ways you can lose a scholarship. One is you stop rowing. Two, you commit a crime and you get a police record. You probably get booted out of the country as well. So that's really important to know the difference. If you are looking at going to an Ivy school, there's another. I'm aware of one that's at Clemson, which is a fully funded, huge school, university, massive football program that funds their sport there. They've got their own lake with a fully buoyed 6-lane, 8-lane 2K course that finishes in front of the shed. But if Clemson has an arrangement with Brisbane called a sister city, where if you don't get a scholarship there, you can go as a local and last year I think it was 22,000 a year for enrolment there per year. If you came from California or from overseas, it'd be about 55,000. So for some reason there's an arrangement there with Clemson and Brisbane. I'm not aware of any others, but I thought that was reasonably interesting. Okay, what does RA do in regards to my role? We provide opportunities for kids who are over there to represent Australia from the US. So they don't, to line up this selection process, US and back here, we've found in the past it's virtually impossible. A little bit like the head of the river, you can't get access to the athletes until after the NCAAs, or for the guys, the IRAs, and then the coaches are really happy for them to go for national selection, hopefully make a national team, compete on the world stage and bring all that experience back to their programs. So we provide that opportunity at Princeton. We've been going there for a number of years. Princeton has its own lake. It's about 5k long. It's got a 4-lane, fully buoyed course, so it allows us to do proper seat racing. It's a huge boat shed with ergos and bikes and so forth. And we've really formed a great relationship there with the head coach, particularly the men's head coach, Greg Hughes, and we lease their gear and run the trials out of there. And on a normal year, we'd run the trials, have a small camp there, and then go to our high performance centre in North Italy, in Varese, meet up with the rest of the team, have the pre-World Championships camp there, and then go to the World Championships. So it's a great experience for the kids. And the beauty of that is the kids at the US, not only do they get to represent their country, which is really important, and that's what they want to do. They also mix in with the rest of the team. They can't wait to get to Varese, so they're with the rest of the Aussies. And that's the crew I had in 2022 that got the bronze medal. Up on the right there, that's Princeton, that's the boathouse. The other colleges call it the country club. It is just a huge and beautiful boat shed, and we're very lucky. That's 23's crew, they came fourth. Yep. And this is at Varese, at our centre over there. That's a junior pair I had, and it does get very hot there, but it's amazing. You look up and you can see the snow on the Alps. It is just a most beautiful place to train, and we're very lucky to have it. And these are the girls that we've had over the years. This one here on the right, they got a bronze medal in 2019, gold medal over there, and gold medal again last year. One, as you look at it, second from the left there, Sammy Morton, just missed out on the women's 8, but hopefully she's back again this year. That's the crew I had this year, bronze medal. I had a terrific row to get that. 6 are back again next year, and the other 2 are desperate to get into the NTC. Yep. Okay, this is probably the most, I know that I've sort of bored you so far. This is, if you I normally have this for the kids, so if you can take this on board, these next 2 slides are the most important. I'm not sure if I said at the start, but I'm not a recruiter, and I say that really openly. My role is to make sure that we look after the kids who are over there, the Aussies who are over there, through the kids and the coaches to build. I try to build a relationship where they feel comfortable, the coaches feel comfortable, the athletes feel comfortable with me, and I've got a strong bond and relationship with them, so they feel safe, because at the end of the day, I want them to come back to the NTC like a lot of our men have, and women. So if you are looking to go, you need to develop your own CV and start the conversation. Your name, obviously the school. 2 questions they always ask. You tell your kids this: how tall are you, and what's your best 2K ergo? Right from the start. Then the rest try and pad it out. Like if you've been to the Nationals, you've been to the New South Wales Championships, they're two big regattas, and what you've rowed there, whether you've rowed big boats, small boats, with your rowing history, and also any extracurricular activity. And now if your coaches can get some video of, if they're going over, of them rowing, sculling, racing, that sort of helps as well. They have to start the conversation. I don't start any conversation, okay? And you normally start off with an email with your CV to the head coach, head recruiter, with that resume. And they're very busy. I suggest if they're not sure, they send it off to at least a dozen schools, especially the girls. The guys, you'd only have half a dozen, if that. Then you narrow it down to 3 to 5. I'd say 3 to 4 max. If you can get a tour of the universities, that's the big thing. And one of my guys from Nudgee, he had 3 schools he was going to for a tour. Cal Berkeley, Yale and Princeton. And Yale thought, because they were the top school, they won the IRAs 3 years in a row, they thought he would go there. But after being on these tours, and you spend 48 hours at each university, you become a student there, like a freshman. You'll sleep in the dorms. They'll partner you up with someone, and you'll sleep there for 48 hours. You'll go to the dining room there. You'll go to training with them, but you don't train. You'll be in the coach's launch. You go to their weights training, but you don't lift weights. You watch them, but you're part of it for 48 hours. You'll go to lectures as well, and sit in at lectures. And they all say that after that, they've come away and said, yep, that place is for me. All right? I thought this, but no, I'm going there. So it gives them a real feel for it. In regards to the females in particular, be really cognizant of incentive scholarships. Make sure you get that in writing. Incentive scholarships is creeping in more with the guys as well. We'll give you 20% first year, but if you make the first or second 8, or you make the second 8, we'll bump it up to 50%, and if you make the first 8, we'll bump it up to 75%, and if we get in the top 3, 80%, just be really aware of those. And it's a process. You won't do it all in one hit. And I've been involved, I'd say with a dozen to 20 parents and kids over the last 12 months in regards to this, and it would, on average, it takes somewhere between the parents and me and them 5 or 6 emails and phone calls. And tonight, all your questions, you'll go away and you think, oh, what about that? That's the girls this year. They got 4th. They're all from the, if you go back to the girls, they're all from the US, including the coxswain. Those crews that I've had up there, they're all from the US. Apart from this year's crew, we had one guy from Australia go over to make it up. Yeah, it's a lot of information to take in, I know that, and you're probably thinking about what you can have for dinner. So if you've got any questions at all, I'm happy to take them, or if you rather do it personally, I've got no problem with that either. I can either email or phone anytime at all. Any questions from anyone here?
All right, and all of these slides you'll receive.
Just in regards to some of those rules, when I was at Princeton, there's a book about that thick with Ivy rules. So the NCAAs would be, and they're constantly changing, would be a lot thicker than that. There's rules for rules, and they're really strict in regards to the training they do over there. They're only allowed to do 20 hours a week maximum for 26 weeks of the year. The rest of the time it's 8 hours. When I say that, it's supervised training, so with a coach, and the rest of the time is 8 hours a week of supervised training with a coach. And if you break that, the repercussions are really quite severe. So I don't know, speaking to the coaches, and particularly in really good programs, they will never push over the boundary. They'll push right up to it, but if they get caught, it's just not worth it to go over there, to go over it. Yes, Jamie?
How many athletes do we...
That we know of, and this is the frustrating part about the job, we've got over 120 over there. Aussies over there, we've got over 1,200, or moving further up on all sports, swimming, basketball, golf is a big one now as well. So there's a lot of Aussies over there, but
it's a bit like that last point there. If you go, tell us.
Exactly. So an example, a couple again, two families from Brisbane, talk about a process. I sat down with them, first of all, conversation on the phone, email, another phone conversation, meet at the coffee shop, go through it all. The two girls get a full scholarship to Northeastern. I don't know anything about it. They've had the scholarship for over a month. It's only that I ran into their coach who was telling me last weekend that they've gone over there. And I said, would you just tell us when you go? But they don't. And again, like those emails, I'll email the head coach and the head recruiters. This is who I think this is who we've got on our database at your university. Can you let us know if that's right? If any new ones have come in, and I'd say 40% don't even reply, because they haven't got time. Yeah. Anything else? I hope that just sort of gives you more of an idea of what's going on over there. Ideally, in a perfect world, we wouldn't want any of our kids going over, but we can't stop them. They are going, and it's getting bigger and bigger. I know New Zealand have appointed someone in the same role that I've got, full-time. GB have appointed someone as well, and I was talking to her at the under-23s. I said, we got over 120. She goes, we got 250 athletes from GB in the US and getting bigger. So it's huge. Yep.
Are they taking away the Cox 4 at under-23s?
Well, I believe so. That's different than, that's at FISA. Noel would probably know more about that than me. I think that's in February they make that decision, but it's looking that way, isn't it?
So would you, because like usually over at the US they take a Cox 4 and an A, if the A is fast enough, would they consider taking a different vote from the US other than Cox 4 and A?
We've only had an 8 from the US. We've never had sorry, the Cox 4 with they'll only have the 8 now. We've started the 8. The previous year was supposed to be an 8, and for reasons I don't know why it never eventuated. But they're looking at because that's all they row over there is the 8s. So maybe whether back here, if you don't make the pair, looking at sweep, if you don't make the pair of the 4, and you've hit benchmarks in other things. Like this year, invite them over to trial against the US kids to see how they go. So I think there'll be more of that, kids who miss out here. If they've hit the benchmark, they'll be invited over to trial.
Any appetite in GB?
Sorry?
Any appetite in the program? Is similar to
Any, sorry?
From their universities.
Yeah. Right, yeah, they're just... Well, they're not losing, but there's more and more of their kids going across there all the time. So they're just trying to work with them as well.
Did you mean
from Australia to...
Oh, sorry. As far as I know, there's no scholarships available, and the education's quite expensive over there in GB. There are a number of kids from the US that have finished their degrees and then will go and do a master's in either Oxford or Cambridge. So there are those, yeah, and they're being targeted as well. But with that, you have to have the academics, the GPA, and it's pretty high. So I think it knocks out a fair few.
Undergraduate, will it?
No, not that I know of at undergrad. You'd be paying a fair bit, so as far as I know.
Some that do bridging programs, the usual intake into the States is sort of August, September start. So that's 9 months after you finish. So you can get a domestic season year out of it. Some will go straight away and they'll go to Oxford or even Leander as a hot cross club, and they'll do a summer there in a bridging type program, right, and then they'll go to the States.
Yeah, but not as a scholarship.
Not too
Yeah,
many-
yeah.
Not too many will go to a 4-year course in UK.
All right. Thanks,
Okay,
John.
beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, now we move, so that's an opportunity for our young athletes. The other opportunities we have are here and they're in Victoria, so it's about our Vic Pathway team and our under-19 trial boat opportunities. So firstly, before I give you any detail about those, Alex Williams, would you like to come up? Oh, here we go. Can you just pop this on so the recording can hear you? And just attach it to your collar or something. That's it.
Yep.
Beautiful. You can pop it in your pocket if you want. So, Alex finished school last year,
Yeah.
2023, at the Geelong College, and in that year he rowed in the Pathway 8 and then was relatively young when you finished school, so you're under 19 this year,
Yeah.
and was selected, went to trials in his single scull, pardon me, and was selected in as the under 19 double to go to the World Championships where he got a bronze medal. So I think a clap for that one. So it's been a pretty hectic time. Now, what I'd like to ask you first is, in year 12, you obviously were rowing well and you decided to nominate for the Pathway 8. So how was that experience for you and what do you feel you gained? What was the benefit of doing that in your year 12 year?
So I thought it was really important that I did that because being in Geelong, you don't really make those connections with people from Melbourne. So that Pathway 8 made me make connections with people of Melbourne. You know, I've got some friends who are now rowing at Melbourne Uni, Mercs, that I wouldn't have if I didn't do that. But also it was very helpful to do a trialling process outside of school. Yeah.
Okay, so you were ready to wait for that because you wanted to focus on your year 12 year and
Yeah.
your exams?
Definitely.
So at the end of year 12, you hadn't rowed too much during your exams? You'd put that aside, just studied?
Yeah.
When was it that you decided that you were going to get back into rowing, and when did you decide on that process that maybe under 19 trials was where you were headed?
So between the seasons at school, I trained at the club at Crow Bay, just in a single. And I was training up until exams, took a break during exams. And then the goal from the start of last season was to make the team. I gave myself like a 1% chance of making it. But it wasn't really until really nationals where I was in the running to actually go for the team. It was based off the results there that made the decision to go to trials. And yeah.
And trials went well. So being older and being 19 and have left school, by now Alex had finished school. He had moved over at the start of March, end of February, moved over to Adelaide, studying medicine at Adelaide Uni, and rowed for Crow Bay up at Nationals.
SA State Champs.
State Champs.
And
Crow
then I
Bay.
rode Melbourne, Adelaide Uni.
Uni
Yeah.
at Nationals. So able to row with someone else interstate, not doing year 12, and you had to work out uni. Now your doubles partner was from Queensland. Where did you train and how did that work?
So we had to, so when I started the idea of going for the team, we got this massive calendar out and we found out the times that I could be away when I had to be in Adelaide for exams, where I would be away for, racing, and figured all that out before trials. And then we kind of made the combination after nationals, and we trained for a week before trials. I went up to the Gold Coast to train there, and then we flew down to Sydney for the trials. The training for the double, I went up to the Gold Coast 2 times, and Luke came down to Adelaide once for about 2 weeks at a time each, and then obviously the training in Canada as well.
Right, so that just wouldn't have been possible if you're in year 12.
No.
So good decision to leave it after to later. And also I guess then you have the option of anyone in Australia, if you can afford to move and train where your partner is going to be. Also I guess you could keep training because you were sculling in a single while you were away from your doubles partner.
Yes.
At that time. So when you went to trials, what was the environment like? Was it friendly? Was it high pressure? Was it who looked after you? How did trials go?
Well, I was lucky because I knew Christine McLaren, and she was actually the coach for the SA Pathway 8. So she was kind of taking care of me there, and that was helpful. But the environment, there definitely was pressure. It's obviously not going to be an easy thing to do. You have to race every race like it's your last. But having that kind of support net behind me was really helpful.
So where did you stay?
Just at some hotel in Penrith, yeah.
Who organised it?
We organised it, yeah.
Right, okay. So it was it's the same time frame when you went up for the Pathway 8 the year before. Did you appreciate what was going on at the under-19 trials when you were there with the Pathway Regatta?
Oh, definitely. It's quite complex figuring all that stuff out with the flights, the accommodation, booking all of that stuff. Gaining appreciation of having it all done for us.
Right. So I guess for Alex, being along, he was in year 12, came along, did the Pathway 8. You enjoyed it?
Yes.
Okay, good. That was the answer we were looking for. And then went on to trials the following year, and so good decision to wait 1 year and go with the Pathway and then go to under-19 trials. So from now, you've been over to a World Championship, you've medalled. Is that enabling you or inspiring you to continue rowing? Is that something that has piqued your interest? Would you have kept rowing anyway? How has that affected your mindset towards rowing?
Definitely has inspired me to keep going. I think you generally tend to do things you think you're good at.
Are you going to be able to fit it in with your study?
It's a tough balance between, I had to travel around a lot, but I also had to do uni at the same time, online. Probably not a good example for that, but I had to figure out with the elite athlete program at Adelaide Uni, getting credit for missed classes, and not getting punished for.
Yeah, they were supportive of you?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And I guess that's pretty important too about what tertiary institutions are going to be supportive of this, and as you continue with your rowing. And I do hear from good sources that you're quite studious and that you like routine, so rowing and studying probably go well together for you. Thank you for coming along tonight, and maybe some of these people might have some questions for you at the end of the night. I might just go through some things for the pathway and the under-19s, and if Alex will still be here, if you've got any questions of him, I'm sure that you'll be able to answer them. Thank you. Unfortunately, Tom is unable to make it. I'll just quickly go through this information and then ask for for Noel to talk about a couple of things. So for the opportunities, we haven't got the selection requirements out yet. All of them will be out at the end of the month. The Vic Pathway, the Pathway Regatta is under 19 across the states. Victoria select an under 18 team, and partly that is because we want students who are going probably, unlike Alex, but probably most of them are in year 11, and so they remain at school the following year. They remain in our rowing program the following year as well. The boats are an 8, and for the first time last year there was a Cox Quad. The Cox Quad is going to be at the Pathway Symposium at the end of November, will be confirmed then. The state seemed to be quite happy with it last year, and it was a really good example of us being able to include our scullers in our program as well. We selected 6 coaches, so 3 with the girls' crews. There's 2 girls' crews, and there's 2 boys' crews, and there's 3 coaches on either side. So 2 younger coaches and 1 mentor coach on each side, and that worked quite well because this is a development opportunity for rowers and for coaches. That's outline of the dates. Now, and that will come out as well, and like I said, you'll receive all these along. I tried to find those other lights there, Noel. I didn't know where the other switch was either. So, hold on. I've got them on, they've just got to warm up. Just realised where the light switch was. Right, so one of the issues this year is that normally, or in the past years, the Pathway Regatta and under-19 trials are on at the same time. And that is the same this year. However, they have usually been initially it was at the end of the first week of term 2. Then it went to the start. Last year it was at the start of the first week of term 2, which was excellent. This year, due to Easter being at the end of the term 1 holidays, the regatta is in the middle week, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the under-19 trials, and the Monday, Tuesday for the Pathway Regatta. Now for Victoria, that means that we have nationals, then we have the final week of school, then we have the first week of the holidays, and then we're at the regatta. So we've got 2 weeks, with 1 week being the week after nationals. Now that makes it pretty challenging for us. The dates that are up there are similar to what we've done before, except we don't have Easter at the start of the holidays, so we're able to have trials on the Saturday, Sunday. They'll train only for 1 week, not 2, and then it'll be up to the regatta. In terms of the ergs, we'll ask for 2 ergs. There'll be no invitation for the second erg. People will submit the erg. If it's not submitted by 6 p.m. on the 2nd of April, I presume the person has not decided to continue. Okay, because the very next day, the invitations to the on-water trials will go out. As again, it's really important if you've got athletes that will nominate for this, that the earlier they nominate, the better, so the selectors can watch and we can see who is possibly a potential for these 2 crews. Okay, so the earlier the better. Now I know it's really hard to talk to your rowers about this when you want them to focus on Melbourne Head, or you want them to focus on New South Wales State Champs, or you want them to focus on Head of the River. I understand that. But if there is a way that you could tap some of your rowers on the shoulder at an appropriate time and get them to nominate, and pick the ones that are the potential the good potentials to nominate, that would be really helpful in terms of selections. It's going to be quite a quick turnaround and process. But once again, those dates, you'll receive those. Now for the under-19 trial boat, that is a whole different kettle of fish, as lots of you would be aware. Again, from the end of nationals to trials, you've got 2 weeks. So that's not a really long time to think that you're going to get students to get together in a boat and row, considering when they come back from nationals, you think that you've either had head of schoolgirls or you've had head of the river, which is where a large proportion of our students are, and then you've had nationals down in Tassie, where a lot of our this age rowers will all be competing and focused on. So it's probably unlikely that you're going to have your athletes rowing in boats prior to all those marquee events. Now there's 2 weeks. It's going to take a collaboration between coaches and discussions about how you're going to put your crews together. When they come back, these kids mostly are in year 12. They'll probably have SACs that they have to catch up on because they've been away for nationals. They're going to be pretty tired. They've had a pretty busy couple of weeks. But then you've got to get them ready for trials that's in that second week of the holidays. So there's going to be a lot of, as I said, talk and a need for talk and collaboration between coaches. This is not a state team. Rowing Victoria don't run trials for this. So how do you know who's possible likelihood for this? What does a coach have to function like to be a possible coach, to be able to take people through, firstly to trials and then to actually be the coach of an Australian crew? Okay, I'll get Noel to talk about that in a moment. What RV has to do is we have to put the entries in. We can only put 1 boat in each class. So if there are 2 doubles that want to go up, or there's 2 fours that want to go up, we can only enter 1. So we have to decide which boat is the fastest. And if need be, we will run races to determine that. But that's what RV will do. So it's important that we understand who's around and what's going on. Then it's between the coaches. If there are 2 crews and maybe they go and race and one's faster than the other, then you can ask for advice from key people in our community. Is this boat going to be fast enough? Because it is a big effort to go to trials, and as Alex said, you've got to row every race like it's your last, because it very well might be your last. And it's the parents, the athletes and the coaches that organise the logistics to get up there, to manage everything up there. I can help, but when we have our pathway, we know what's going to happen. I'll book our flights and accommodation in the next couple of weeks. So when all this happens, it's quite a rush. Now, I'm happy to help, but warning would be helpful for me to be able to work with you to do that, because it's not a Victorian, a state team, okay? But we want to get our best athletes, give the best kids the most chance of making an Australian team. And we know we've got athletes that are keen. The under-19 event requirements from RA went up last week, popped that in, I think went up last Thursday. Nominations are in January, but keep your eye on that one. The World Championships this year, unlike last year that were basically almost at the end, or this year, basically at the end of term 3. Next year, they're like they were 2 years ago. They're in week 3 of term 3, so much earlier. Now, it's really difficult in Victoria to get this together with the way our schools run. We've got super strong athletes. We've got committed coaches. We've got we've got the potential to put really good crews together, and it really lays in coaches' hands how that is done and how well you can work together to do this. Now, one of the things is what kind of athlete are you looking for, and number 2, what do you need to be as a coach to be able to take this through. Now, I'd like to invite Noel up to have a few words about this, if you could. Would that be all right? Got a bit more experience than me. Could you talk into this so it goes to the... There we go. No, it's just going to the camera. You're on camera.
Just back up the bus, I'll put my hand up for Pathways and say how good it is. Threw a whole heap of my school kids into it this year. They enjoyed it, and on Saturday it comes to a crescendo when Creebs, as captain of boats, is racing against his Pathway teammates in the single sculls there. So the banter amongst the boys has already started, which is a good thing. You know, they learn, they get mates before they've even left school. They start to, you know, understand there's a wider bit about rowing out there too. So it's nice to think that it's an all Melbourne Grammar crew again, but we need to get more schools involved in it there too. It's actually a reasonable standard, and so we came 4th or 5th or something this year too, with mainly a lot of kids from one school. So just so it says you need a cross-pollination of all the good kids if you actually want to win that, which we did. We've won the girls a few times, and we won the boys a couple of years ago as well. But that's a really good event, and Noel was the chief cook and bottle wash selector for the team. Juniors, so Jean alluded to a question earlier with Bosie. It is more likely than not that the Coxed 4 will go off the World Championship program for under 19 and under 23 boys and girls, because everything has to be gender equal these days, and that's just a refinement and strategies. And generally when the executive of World Rowing makes those decisions, and those decisions were actually recommendations of the Competition Commission, then despite people sort of trying to defeat that process, whatever, it is more likely than not that it actually gets through. The one time that did get through actually was with the men's lightweight 8 many years ago. Australia led a charge. How dare they take the lightweight 8 away? The vote got up and they retained the lightweight 8. The president of World Rowing said at the time, and of course Rowing Australia, you'll be sending a crew, won't you, next year? Of which we didn't have a crew, what we thought of the standards, so we're a bit hypocritical about it all. So they weren't too fussed about 2 years later when the fields hadn't been past heats, that off, you know, and then a continuing demise of poor old lightweight rowing. So that's a boat that suits a lot. We have a high percentage of kids in this state who row sweep than sculling, hence the idea, which firstly started this year with the Cox Quad at the pathway level. I understand, Bosie may know a little bit more about it, there's a new sculling strategy being talked about at RA. No men's scullers qualified for the Olympic Games this year, and yet there are 7 spots available, so we missed 7 opportunities to qualify there. And so then if you look at the balance across sweep and sculling of the boats that are available, then sculling is not a bad option. So Alex is a really good example, as happened to Harry Fox, who rose out of Melbourne University here when he won, Fergus Hamilton, who Mercantile Melbourne Grammar School, both world champions in the double, and we've got a bronze medalist here, all of them rowing in what's called a camp-based program. So if you've got one really good sculler, boy or girl, there is an opportunity that you can still find your way through the junior system, if it fits. The difficulty in some of that a little bit is that through Queensland and Western Australia changing the dates of, and South Australia changing the dates of education now, 95% of school leavers have turned 18 years of age, and so therefore they're ineligible the following year. So Alex is a really small minority of that age demography. So we're looking mainly at the school age population for junior teams. So then you've got to be thinking, how does junior fit in while they're doing year 12? You've got to train really well. Pity Tom's not here, because he did a good job with Will Ackerman at the back there in terms of trying to put together what was a Cox 4 that only Mr bronze medal by a small amount. That was really collaborative effort to get it. You take that boat off as an available thing, so what magic are Will and Tom going to do next year? Because things like 8s are not easy. New South Wales sent an 8, which was a really good collaborative thing in the boys last year, and deemed to be not fast enough. And then they divided it in 2, put them into a 4, and 4 boys ended up being world champions in a 4. So a little bit of thinking to go. There is a pathway symposium in a couple of weeks' time that Del and I and John will be at, where these sorts of topics will get thrashed around a little bit about, are there other solutions, where are we at? The under-19 policies, as is, published last week, is really, really simple. And as Del and I articulated, it's about collaboration, working together. Have you got kids good enough to go? What I would say is, and I have probably 1 or 2 that might be good enough in my school program, but they're actually in the first 15 rugby team as well, you know. So there's a dilemma from my point of view. Am I promoting rowing, or am I promoting the students over wellbeing? There's a lot of those sort of decisions that sort of go on about whether you might mount a campaign or not mount a campaign in that regard. But if you were thinking of going, I think it's far better to know that you've got athletes of a really high calibre that are going to go and try and challenge for medal in your eyes in terms of standard, because number one, you've got to get selected firstly. And we've actually sent a lot of kids away who thought they were going to be world champions, thought they were going to go to the Olympic, you know, they're going to go to the World Junior Championships and win, didn't get past ground zero once they actually got to the junior trials, because people didn't realise it's a really high level at that level to actually get selected. So if you are thinking about it, then I'd be thinking, have we got kids of the calibre that can go all the way and then work your way backwards from there? So we're not sending 4 little ones there because they move nicely or whatever, and it's doubtful that things like one school can do a particular boat class all on their own. Maybe double. The pair could be a little bit different because convenience, you know, you can get them to school the same time back. The time management works a little bit better. Double, you can train in a single, so you don't always have to be together, so it can work in terms of what you're doing, because we're now reduced in the number of opportunities that we can go for. The question that will be put probably to RA will be, where will an 8 maybe sit? Will something like a composite 8 be put on the table where you put all the best kids together and do it just on a moderate campaign? Because that's a really key boat. And we had, you know, boys 4 winning, girls 4 coming 4th, and that's out of it. So the straight 4 is still there, but therefore that's a more technical boat, and you would need to start thinking about that now and give kids a bit of an experience about what rowing that boat class is about, so that they can actually handle it, steer it straight, work on their pressures and their skills, and it's a harder boat to row for kids that haven't had enough time together, whatever, to get the nuances and the technical proficiency in there. So if you are thinking of it and you've got kids of that calibre there, think early about how that can actually get put together and test it out. You know, the sad, sorry tales that we've actually had was actually inside this boathouse in this room 2 years ago, when we had quite a lot of keen kids, but we knew they weren't really good, and then they were starting to work it out themselves and they were dropping off like flies, and then you're left with 3, and what do we actually do with them and the like, and in the end we had to can the whole thing. But if we had started with a really boutique group of really talented kids there, it may well have got off the ground. So as Dylan said, it's a really difficult thing to do, but there's been some real highlights in it at the same time, and we need to keep sort of chipping away and trying to get small, good numbers still having an opportunity to represent their country. It's a pretty good opportunity of, you know, wearing the green and gold, but it's not, unfortunately, not for everyone. And given there's no Australian under-21 team now racing New Zealand, that's going to be a youth cup in the middle of the year in Adelaide. And then things like, you know, junior campaign for some, as part of their overall development. You know, it's not a bad thing. And Jamie's been through it. That worked really well. 2 local girls have been rowing together 3 or 4 years within fours, and you know, they rode their pair a bit beforehand, so theirs fitted together quite nicely, and they got a bronze. So we've got little pockets here and there that do really, really well, and we've sort of got to look at it and explore it. But it's a bit like what John was actually saying. RV don't want to micromanage it or control it, but it's far better to know, because the problem happens at the end there. Jamie's got a pair, I've got a pair, we don't talk to one another, and then at the end of the day, Dylan's got to come along with battle. You've got to come down to Carrum and race one another over 2,000 metres, only one of you's going. And then there's tears and everyone's up in arms and calling one another names and all those sort of things there, which can be solved by good communication early, you know. It might work that we put our kids together in the same boat. You know, there are those sort of things there too, where it's a bit of coaches shelving egos, you know, clubs working collaboratively, talking to Delwyn and those sort of things there, because we're meant to be all on the same page for it. And it derails itself somewhere. And we had examples last year, you know, coaches in tears, and that's because they want to coach the boat and another coach wants to coach it as well. And then RA crack the shits with us and say, well, you can only have one. And we go to trials with 2 coaches, and then you've got to pick someone. I had to do that 2-3 years ago in Canberra when the trials were there, and say to one coach, look, we've polled the athletes. We don't control this, but somehow RA has told us to fix the problem. It's not their problem, it's our problem. And yet there's no selection mechanism within our state to be able to do it there too. So that, we've just got to keep the message going out there. We want the best thing for kids, and we need, you know, coaches to work harmoniously and whatever. And Will's a bit like that with Tom, you know. Each of either of them could have done a ripper job, but in the end they worked it out and one guy did it, you know. So maybe it's his turn next year, whatever. So.
Go, you work on your own, and we end up taking a crew, and maybe we miss a couple of our best athletes, and we don't end up with the fastest crew. So it's quite challenging.
Yeah, when we had a situation there out of one provincial centre, won't mention where it is, where there wasn't a great collaboration across the centre, you know, and they went as 2 entities, and of course no one got selected rather than putting all the best ones together. You know. And one crew had actually gone okay actually in the first round, and then RA divided the Sydney 8s into 2, and of course the better 4 of it was actually better than our boat that had gone there. It was a bit of no shit Sherlock, that was always going to happen, and that was because, you know, people sort of putting campaigns together, didn't read the TLEs, didn't understand the standard. That's why it's important, you know, that Dylan knows, because she can then ask, you know, whether it be me or other people or, you know, more experienced people, you know, how do we think this boat's actually going to go? And we can help the process, you know. We're not there to hinder it.
Yeah. But doing all that, you know, in the 2 weeks between nationals and trials, it's a bit crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
Know,
it's crazy this year.
Impossible is the word. So that's where we just need to start working now. And I'm happy to help people find each other, you know, or know what's going on.
Matchmaker.
I'll be the matchmaker. Well, I'll just put you in touch. Yeah, I'll be the app. You can decide who you're going. Rightio. So, at this point, are there any questions at the moment? No? All right. From this point, I will, hopefully, the video worked, and at the very minimum, the PowerPoint will be up, and I will pop a notice out to say that it's out. And then if you've got any questions of anyone and you're not sure to contact, just forward them on and I'll send them to the right people. I'd like to thank John for being here. He's here through till Saturday, so we'll see some of your rowers rowing at Melbourne Head. Thanks for Noel speaking. Thanks for our guests. I know 3 of our rowers have gone and Alex is still here. So thank you for that. You're not rowing early in the morning, Alex? No, we just keep our coaches up. All right, just keep our coaches up. You only have to get up early as well. So thank you very much. And I hope that we can work well during the season and pass the message on to others that aren't here, and I'll get this information out to as many people as I can. Okay, let's have a great season. Thank you.